For decades, Lisa Bonet has existed in a space that few celebrities ever managed to reach. She was visible, admired, and influential, yet never fully absorbed by Hollywood's loud machinery. From the outside, she appeared mysterious, calm, and distant, but beneath that image was a woman who had been quietly questioning fame from the very beginning. Long before her separation from Jason Momoa became public news, Lisa had already built a life defined by restraint rather than ambition. Her transformation after marriage ended did not come with dramatic interviews, bold reinventions, or public explanations. Instead, it arrived as a continuation of a pattern she had followed for most of her life, choosing inner peace over external approval. Friends noticed subtle changes first. She seemed lighter, more grounded, and less burdened by expectations. Insiders later confirmed that this was not the collapse of a woman after a breakup, but the release of someone who had finally let go of a structure that no longer matched her values. This quiet shift unsettled many people, not because it was shocking, but because it offered no drama to consume. In an industry that thrives on visible healing and public reinvention, Lisa Bonet's refusal to perform growth felt almost disruptive. To understand why her post-separation life has caused such a stir, it is necessary to return to the beginning, to a childhood shaped by displacement, early fame, and a lifelong discomfort with being defined by other people's expectations. Lisa Bonet was born in San Francisco and raised in Los Angeles, growing up in an environment where she often felt out of place. After her parents divorced, she became an only child, and that sense of emotional solitude followed her into adulthood. She later spoke about feeling unanchored, never fully belonging to one world or another. Acting entered her life almost by chance, when a friend invited her to take an acting class. For the first time, Lisa felt that being different was not something to hide. That experience led to early television roles and eventually to the audition that would change her life forever. When she was cast as Denise Huxtable on The Cosby Show at just 16 years old, Lisa became part of one of the most influential television families in American history. The show was a massive success, dominating ratings and shaping cultural conversation for years. Denise Huxtable became a fashion icon and a symbol of youthful confidence, but behind the scenes, Lisa remained uneasy. Fame came quickly and cleanly, leaving little room for personal exploration. Producers noticed early on that Lisa was not interested in becoming a product of the system. She resisted being molded, choosing authenticity even when it made her difficult to categorize. While many young actors embrace the safety and stability of television fame, Lisa quietly searched for ways to step outside the image that America had placed on her. This internal conflict would soon bring her into direct confrontation with Hollywood's expectations, forcing her to make choices that would permanently shape her career and her relationship with fame itself. As Lisa Bonet moved from her teenage years into adulthood, the gap between who she truly was and who the public expected her to be grew wider and harder to ignore. On television, she was still seen as a dependable, cheerful big sister in a perfect family, but inside she felt restless and constrained. Fame had come too early and too neatly, leaving little space for mistakes or growth. Lisa understood something many young actors do not realize until much later. Once an actor becomes a symbol, escaping that symbol can come at a heavy cost. Hollywood had already decided who she was supposed to be, and that version of her left no room for complexity, curiosity, or change. This awareness led Lisa to make a decision that shocked audiences and permanently altered her relationship with the entertainment industry. At just 18 years old, she accepted a role in the film Angel Heart, a dark and emotionally intense project that stood in sharp contrast to the wholesome image attached to her name. The film explored mature themes and included scenes that made many viewers uncomfortable, not because they were unfamiliar with adult cinema, but because they conflicted with the innocent image America had created for Lisa. When the movie was released, the reaction was swift and unforgiving. Headlines focused less on her performance and more on her body, her choices, and the idea that she had somehow betrayed the audience. The film's rating was adjusted after its initial release, and public discussion centered almost entirely on whether Lisa Bonet had gone too far. What was often ignored was her reasoning. Lisa never described her role as an act of rebellion. Instead, she explained that television actors were rarely taken seriously in film, and that she wanted to grow as an artist rather than remain trapped in one role forever. She made it clear that her responsibility was to herself, not to preserving a fictional character's reputation. This calm refusal to apologize shocked an industry that was used to compliance, especially from young women. The consequences arrived quickly. Around the same time, Lisa was positioned to lead a different world, a spin-off centered on her Cosby Show character. While the show began successfully, tensions behind the scenes grew. When Lisa became pregnant, it revealed deeper conflicts between her personal reality and the rigid expectations of network television. Some producers discussed writing the pregnancy into the story, reflecting real life and personal growth. However, the final decision was firm. The character could not change alongside the woman portraying her. As a result, Lisa stepped away from the series she had helped inspire. Public narratives painted her exit as difficult or irresponsible, but people close to production later spoke in her defense, emphasizing her youth and the intense pressure she was under. At barely 20 years old, Lisa Bonet found herself judged not only for her professional choices, but for her body, her motherhood, and her refusal to follow a path laid out by others. This period marked a clear turning point. Hollywood began to view her as unpredictable, while Lisa began to see Hollywood as conditional. Opportunities came with rules, expectations, and limits she was no longer willing to accept. Rather than fighting to be understood, she quietly stepped back. What many saw as career damage was, for Lisa, a necessary separation. She was learning that visibility often required compromise, and compromise was something she had never been comfortable with. This realization would shape every chapter of her life that followed, influencing how she approached love, motherhood, work, and eventually, the marriage that many believed had finally anchored her. But even then, the pattern remained the same. Lisa Bonet did not disappear because she failed. She stepped away because she refused to live a life that did not feel like her own. Motherhood did not enter Lisa Bonet's life as a side chapter or a temporary pause. It arrived as a complete shift in direction, changing how she saw herself, her time, and her purpose. When her daughter Zoe was born, Lisa's priorities moved away from career momentum and toward stability, presence, and emotional grounding. This change was often misunderstood by the industry, which tends to view slowed productivity as failure rather than choice. For Lisa, stepping back was not an act of confusion, but an act of clarity. She spoke openly in interviews during that period about wanting to be present for her child and about the importance of building a life that did not revolve around constant attention. Her marriage to musician Lenny Kravitz was intense, creative, and deeply emotional, but unfolded under relentless public observation. Both were young, successful, and trying to grow while being watched. When the marriage eventually ended, it was painful for both of them. Lenny later described that time as emotionally exhausting, filled with pressure and self-reflection. Instead of turning the separation into a public narrative, Lisa quietly reorganized her life. She moved with her daughter to Topanga Canyon, choosing a space far removed from Hollywood's pace and expectations. There, life slowed down. Animals, nature, and routine replaced red carpets and casting rooms. Zoe grew up surrounded by openness rather than spectacle, and Lisa embraced a version of motherhood that prioritized grounding over ambition. During this time, Lisa made another deeply symbolic decision that few public figures would consider. She legally changed her name to Lila Coy Moon, explaining that she wanted a name that reflected her private identity rather than the public image attached to her career. This was not a publicity move. It was an intentional separation between the woman she was becoming and the character the world refused to let go of. Professionally, this period was often labeled as disappearance. In reality, it was a recalibration. Lisa never rejected acting entirely, but she rejected the idea that her value depended on constant visibility. She spoke about yoga, introspection, and living consciously not as trends, but as tools for survival. These practices helped her remain connected to herself in a culture that often pulls people away from their own instincts. When Zoe later chose to live with her father for a period of time, Lisa supported the decision despite the emotional difficulty. It reflected a consistent pattern in her life, choosing what felt right over what felt comfortable. Hollywood, as it often does, moved on quickly. New faces replaced old ones, and attention shifted elsewhere. Lisa did not chase relevance or attempt to come back, designed to remind people she still mattered. When she eventually returned to acting, It was on her own terms, in projects that aligned with her values rather than her past fame. The woman who reappeared was not the teenage icon audiences remembered. She was quieter, firmer, and far less willing to explain herself. This restraint became one of her defining traits. It also shaped the way she approached love later in life, setting the stage for a relationship that many believed had finally brought balance and lasting partnership into her world. Yet even in that relationship, the same truth remained. Lisa Bonet did not bend herself to fit anyone else's rhythm. She carried her stillness with her wherever she went. When Lisa Bonet met Jason Momoa, their connection did not feel like a public event waiting to happen. There were no headlines or carefully staged appearances in the beginning. They met quietly at a jazz club in Los Angeles, long before Momoa became a global star, and long before his life was reshaped by major film franchises and worldwide fame. At that time, Jason was younger, relatively unknown, and openly nervous around Lisa, who had already lived through intense fame, backlash, and withdrawal. The difference between them was not about power, but about timing. Lisa had already learned how fragile public approval could be, while Jason was still discovering what it meant to be seen. Their bond grew naturally, away from constant media attention. Lisa was drawn to Jason's emotional openness and enthusiasm for life, and he was drawn to her steadiness and calm. He later admitted that he had admired her since childhood, but what kept him close as an adult was not nostalgia. It was a sense of safety and grounding she offered. Over time, their lives blended. They built a family that outsiders often described as rare and enviable. Lisa and Lenny Kravitz remained close, co-parenting with mutual respect, while Jason entered the family dynamic without conflict or tension. Their children were raised with continuity rather than division, creating a sense of emotional stability that many blended families struggle to achieve. For Lisa, this mattered deeply. Family had always been her anchor, and for a period, it seemed she had found a balance between love and independence. When she spoke about the relationship in interviews, she described feeling supported and protected in ways she had not experienced before. That feeling allowed her to remain true to herself without constant defense. The marriage came later, after many years together, and it was intentionally understated. There were no grand statements about fairy tales or lifelong promises. Instead, the language they used focused on growth, partnership, and shared values. From the outside, it appeared that Lisa had finally found a way to love without losing herself. But stability, especially in public life, often hides slow and quiet changes. As Jason Momoa's career accelerated, his life began to revolve around long shoots, constant travel, and public appearances that demanded ongoing reinvention. Projects kept him away from home for months at a time, and the pace that once felt exciting gradually became exhausting for someone who had spent decades building a life around stillness and routine. The issue was not conflict or betrayal. It was divergence. Lisa did not want to chase momentum or adapt her life to constant movement. She wanted to protect the calm she had worked so hard to create. Over time, these differences stopped being negotiable. When the couple eventually separated, the decision had already been lived privately long before it was announced publicly. The emotional work was done away from cameras, without spectacle or blame. When the announcement finally came, there were no accusations, no public unraveling, and no attempt to control the narrative. There was only a quiet acknowledgement that the life they once shared no longer fit both of them. For many observers, the separation was surprising. For Lisa, it was consistent. She had always chosen alignment over attachment, even when it meant walking away from something deeply meaningful. This moment marked the beginning of what many would later call her transformation, though in truth, it was simply the continuation of a path she had been following for years. After the separation from Jason Momoa became public, many people expected Lisa Bonet to follow a familiar pattern that Hollywood often encourages. There was an assumption that she would reappear with a dramatic makeover, a carefully worded statement, or a visible effort to redefine herself in the public eye. None of that happened. Instead, Lisa did what she had always done during major transitions in her life. She stepped back. This withdrawal was not driven by sadness or defeat, but by intention. Court records later showed that the emotional separation had taken place long before the announcement, revealing that the decision was thoughtful rather than impulsive. While headlines framed the split as sudden, Lisa had already been living in its aftermath, quietly reshaping her daily life. Friends describe her as calmer, more grounded, and more deliberate in her choices. There was no rush to replace what had ended, and no urgency to prove resilience through visibility. Public appearances became even more rare. Acting projects were no longer a priority, and there was no sign of pressure to return. Financially, she was secure. Emotionally, she felt no need to perform productivity as a measure of worth. For Lisa Bonet, work had never been the center of her identity. It was simply one form of expression among many. What began to draw attention, instead, was how she looked while seemingly doing nothing at all. In a culture that expects visible effort, especially from women aging in public, Lisa appeared unchanged. Her face was not tightened or reshaped. Her body was not rebranded. She looked present rather than perfected. This sparked speculation and quiet discomfort. But Lisa had addressed her approach to appearance long before. She followed a simple routine focused on consistency rather than correction. She spoke about using natural oils, avoiding excess products, and letting the body exist without constant intervention. Yet the real transformation people sensed was not physical. It was behavioral. Lisa remained absent from social media. She avoided public commentary and did not offer explanations for her choices. Her days were shaped by routine rather than reaction. Time with her children, extended family, and a small circle of trusted friends became the foundation of her life. Yoga, movement, writing, and time in nature were not new habits, but long-standing practices that continued to support her emotional health. In a culture obsessed with reinvention, Lisa Bonet's refusal to perform healing unsettled people. It challenged the idea that growth must be visible, dramatic, or marketable. By not offering a story of recovery or comeback, she removed herself from narratives that thrive on spectacle. What many interpreted as disappearance was actually completion. Lisa had achieved fame, influence, and cultural impact early in life. What remained was a quieter work of living in alignment without applause. The separation did not create her transformation. It revealed it. It removed the last structure that required her to compromise with a pace she no longer wanted. Rather than walking away in anger, she simply outgrew a chapter that no longer reflected who she was. This quiet refusal to explain herself became a source of unexpected power, one that continues to unsettle an industry built on constant visibility. What truly unsettles Hollywood about Lisa Bonet's post-separation transformation is not mystery, absence, or secrecy. It is clarity. In an industry that depends on constant explanation, visibility, and reinvention, Lisa offered none of those things. She did not reintroduce herself to the public, nor did she attempt to reshape her image to fit current trends. Instead, she became more firmly rooted in the version of herself that had always existed beneath the surface. This kind of outcome resists easy storytelling. It disrupts the familiar narratives people rely on to understand women as they age in the public eye. There was no breakdown to analyze, no comeback to celebrate, and no dramatic lesson to package. Lisa simply continued living according to values she had quietly protected for decades. At a time when many actresses feel pressure to justify their appearance, their absence, or their choices, Lisa explained nothing. She rejected the language of anti-aging entirely, choosing instead to focus on care rather than control. Her approach to beauty centered on movement, nourishment, and consistency rather than correction. Practices like yoga, African dance, and natural routines were not framed as wellness trends, but as ways of staying connected to her body and intuition. This philosophy extended beyond her own life and into her family. When her daughter Zoe faced invasive speculation and public scrutiny about her appearance, the response was direct and human, not defensive or polished. The message was clear and consistent across generations. The body is not a public project. That stance, quiet as it may seem, has become increasingly radical in a culture that profits from insecurity. What many people mistake for disappearance is actually completion. Lisa Bonet achieved fame, influence, and cultural relevance early in her life. She had already lived through adoration, backlash, and reinvention attempts. What remained was a harder, less visible work of living in alignment without applause. The separation from Jason Momoa did not trigger her transformation. It simply removed the last structure that required her to negotiate with a pace she no longer wanted. She did not leave Hollywood in protest or resentment. She outgrew it. She did not abandon love or partnership. She redefined them in ways that preserve her inner life. And she did not become invisible. She became unreachable to narratives that required her to perform pain, recovery, or relevance for public consumption. That is why her transformation continues to cause discomfort. It offers no drama to consume and no lesson to simplify. It offers only a mirror, reflecting a possibility that many find unsettling. That fulfillment does not need to be announced. That growth does not need an audience. And that sometimes the most powerful change is the one that happens quietly, without asking to be seen that in the end. Lisa Bonet's story does not fit comfortably into the kind of narrative Hollywood prefers to tell. There is no dramatic fall, no loud redemption, and no carefully planned return designed to remind the world of her importance. Instead, her life offers something far less common and far more challenging to accept: a woman who chose peace over performance and alignment over applause. From the beginning of her career, Lisa showed signs that she would never fully surrender herself to the demands of fame. As a teenager, she became a cultural icon before she had the chance to understand who she was outside of public attention. That early exposure brought success, but it also taught her how quickly admiration can turn into control. Again and again, she responded to pressure in the same way, by stepping back rather than leaning in. Whether it was walking away from television expectations, slowing her career to raise her children, retreating from Hollywood's constant noise, or quietly ending a marriage that no longer fit her values, the pattern remained consistent. She did not react. She chose. The separation from Jason Momoa became a focal point for public curiosity, not because it was dramatic, but because it refused to be. People expected visible pain or visible reinvention, and when neither appeared, discomfort followed. In a culture that depends on constant access, Lisa's silence felt disruptive. Yet her silence was never empty. It was full of intention, routine, and self-trust. She continued to live a life centered on movement, nature, family, and inner awareness, not as an escape, but as a foundation. Her approach to aging, beauty, and identity challenged deeply rooted assumptions, especially those placed on women in the public eye. She did not attempt to appear younger or more relevant. She appeared present. That presence, calm and unforced, stood in sharp contrast to an industry built on urgency and comparison. What many interpreted as withdrawal was actually completion. Lisa Bonet had already experienced the highs and lows that fame could offer. She had learned what it demanded in return. When the cost became misalignment, she stepped away without bitterness or regret. Her life after separation was not a rejection of love, creativity, or connection. It was a refinement of them. She redefined what partnership meant, what work was worth her energy, and how much of herself she was willing to give to the public. This is why her transformation continues to cause a stir. It offers no spectacle, no simple explanation, and no lesson that can be easily consumed. It asks uncomfortable questions instead. What if growth does not need witnesses? What if fulfillment does not come from being seen, but from choosing when not to be? Lisa Bonet's journey suggests that sometimes the most powerful transformation is not about becoming someone new, but about finally allowing yourself to live as who you have always been. In a world that rewards constant noise, her quiet consistency stands as a rare and radical choice, one that lingers precisely because it refuses to demand attention. Beyond her personal choices and quiet evolution, Lisa Bonet's impact on Hollywood and culture is both subtle and profound. Her career, while not always prolific in terms of screen appearances, has been influential in shaping how audiences and the industry perceive individuality, autonomy, and the concept of celebrity itself. From the beginning, she challenged the idea that young women in Hollywood must conform to strict expectations or sacrifice personal growth for fame. Her early decision to step away from television roles that no longer fit her values sent a clear message. Talent alone is not enough. Integrity and self-direction matter just as much. As a result, Lisa became a model for those who prioritize authenticity over visibility, showing that it is possible to remain relevant without constant performance or public validation. Her influence extends beyond her own work. Many actresses cite Lisa Bonet as an inspiration for how to navigate fame with dignity and control. By choosing projects that align with her values, she demonstrated that women in Hollywood can set boundaries, step back when needed, and return on their own terms. Her approach to beauty and self-care further reinforces her legacy. Rejecting artificial corrections or constant reinvention, Lisa emphasizes practices rooted in consistency, mindfulness, and health, reminding audiences that self-respect matters more than societal expectation. Even her parenting style reflects this philosophy, nurturing independence and emotional intelligence in her children while resisting the pressures of celebrity culture. In a world obsessed with rapid success, dramatic comebacks, and constant social media updates, Lisa Bonet's life offers a quiet alternative. She embodies the idea that influence does not require constant attention or loud self-promotion. It can grow from patience, intention, and grounded living. Her refusal to follow predictable narratives challenges Hollywood to reconsider how it treats women who age, change, or choose paths outside the expected trajectory. The conversations sparked by her transformation are not just about physical appearance or marital changes. They touch on deeper societal questions about autonomy, self-worth, and the ways in which culture measures success. By living authentically, quietly, and deliberately, Lisa Bonet provides an example of power that is not performative. It is steady, resilient, and deeply human. She proves that the most profound changes often happen internally and are visible only to those who pay attention to subtlety rather than spectacle. In this sense, her story resonates not only with aspiring actors or fans of her work, but with anyone navigating the pressures of public expectation, personal growth, and life transitions. Lisa Bonet's evolution shows that the truest transformations are often misunderstood at first, but over time, they leave a legacy far greater than fleeting fame or viral headlines. Her life is a testament to the enduring value of self-knowledge, quiet courage, and the strength found in living in alignment with one's own principles. By choosing stillness, reflection, and intentionality, she challenges a culture that prizes noise over depth and invites a broader conversation about what it really means to thrive in both public and private life. Lisa Bonet's philosophy of life, shaped by decades of personal reflection and experience, stands as one of her most significant legacies. Unlike many in Hollywood who measure success by fame, wealth, or constant output, Lisa measures it through alignment, integrity, and inner peace. Her choices over the years, stepping away from television, slowing her career to raise her children, retreating from public scrutiny, and ending relationships that no longer fit, illustrate a life led with intentionality rather than impulse. Each decision reinforced the idea that visibility is not the same as significance, and that personal growth does not require approval from the world. This approach has quietly influenced how audiences, peers, and aspiring actors view the balance between career, family, and personal authenticity. By living in a way that resists spectacle, Lisa challenges the traditional narrative of celebrity, proving that staying true to oneself can be more radical and more powerful than publicized reinvention or dramatic comebacks. Her life encourages a reevaluation of cultural values. It asks why society measures women, particularly in Hollywood, by appearances and activity rather than by the consistency of their choices and the depth of their inner lives. Lisa's decision to change her name, to embrace routines that nurture body and mind, and to focus on her family and personal growth demonstrates that identity can be claimed privately, away from the pressure of cameras or media scrutiny. She embodies a kind of quiet rebellion, one that is